Today we are going to be talking about My Hero One's Justice 2. I wanted to create a DLC wishlist for My Hero One's Justice 2 since I really enjoy this game and I love its large roster, but there's some characters that I would like to talk about and speculate on how they would play in the game. If you've seen any of my other lists like this, you'll know that we're going to run through all of my choices, reasons for everything, and some speculation and theory crafting, and then go through some honorable mentions before finishing the video. All of that up next. Before we get into the list, allow me to quickly mention a few things. I am limiting myself to 5 choices, firstly because that makes sense as a top 5 list after all, but also because we already know that this game is going to be getting 5 DLC characters in total, even though they aren't all officially announced. I want to quickly mention the 5 DLC characters we are going to be getting, which have been confirmed by data mining. If you want to skip this part of the video because you don't want to be spoiled, follow the timestamp on screen. These 5 characters will not be appearing in my top 5 list or honorable mentions because that just makes no sense. Hawks is already released now, so everyone has had the chance to play him. Personally, I haven't bothered with that character myself since I'm not a massive fan of Hawks. Now into the 4 data mined characters. Itsuka Kendo will be added. This is the girl with orange hair from class 1B with the big fist quirk. This is the character that I am most interested in because I think that she could have a very unique playstyle. I was shocked to find that there were no class 1B characters in the roster already, so I'm glad to see Kendo and she makes the most sense from that class in my opinion. Joining Kendo is none other than Tetsu. This character is also from class 1B and he is the guy with the quirk that allows him to harden his body like steel. I'm glad to see another 1B character here of course. Gameplay wise, his quirk makes it hard to imagine an exciting playstyle, but I have really enjoyed playing characters like Kirishima and Fat Gum, so I think that Tetsu's gameplay could also be interesting for me personally. Then we have Mai Hatsume, another student at UA, but this time coming from the support course. I really like Mai Hatsume, so I'm very happy with this character choice. She can be designed in a number of unique ways because of the nature of her character and how she fights, despite not being a combat focused character. I do value a character's gameplay almost as much as the character themselves, so even if Mei isn't the most exciting character, I'll probably still like her. And finally we are going to be getting Gentle Criminal. Gentle is an interesting character in my opinion. I like his visual design and I think his quirk is interesting enough, but I'm in the middle with this character, simply because I think there's a 50-50 chance of whether or not I will like his gameplay, so let's just wait and see. Here's a quick ranking for how excited I am to try each of these 5 characters, but I've wasted enough of your time, so let's just get into the list already. At number 5 we have Nagama Samura. The Provisional Hero Licensing Exam arc had a big impact on me because of its introduction of so many other characters, although they are relatively unimportant to the overall story. A couple of the standouts for me included Inasa and Gang Orca, both of which are already in this game. But another standout character to me was Nagama Samura. I loved the personality as well as this guy's quirk. If you don't remember him, Nagama Samura was one of the second years of Shiketsu High, the same school that Kami, Saiji and Inasa are from. Anyway, this character was like a mature parental figure compared to the spontaneity of the other students. His quirk, extendo hair, really grabbed my attention from the get-go. I have a strange soft spot for hair-based abilities in shows and games and stuff. To me they're simple, effective and can be used in very interesting ways as a complement to other fighting methods. This is one of the main reasons I love Sindel from the Mortal Kombat series. There's one main reason that I have Mora solo down on this list, and that's because I don't think his gameplay would be designed in a fun way for me personally. I fear that his moveset would be about mid-range pokes and defensive strategies. I'm not completely against a defensive counter-attacking playstyle, but I do prefer to get up close to my opponent most of the time. But yeah, as I said, I'm a massive fan of this guy's personality as well as his quirk, so even if his gameplay didn't captivate me, I think I could still have a lot of fun with him, especially short term. Additionally, he's the only known student of Shiketsu High who isn't currently in the game. Unlike Nagama Samura, my number 4 placement was actually a surprise to me. A surprise that this character wasn't already in the game, and that's Hunter Zero. Hunter Zero is a member of class 1A at UA High, and he is the character with the sellotape quirk. Prior to playing this game, I was honestly surprised to find that Zero wasn't on the roster. I like Mineta and I think that Mina Ashido has some interesting gameplay, however I don't see them as any less important as a character than Zero. And in my opinion he comes across as less of a joke character than those two might. I think there's a lot of different ways you could design Sero that all make sense. His quirk is kind of similar to Nagama Samura when you consider it an additional appendage that can be used to attack from range. However, we have seen more from Sero when it comes to fighting styles and strategies. The main style I'm thinking of is a close range rushdown character with high mobility, using his tape to move around the arena and quickly close the distance for pressure. Maybe he could wrap the opponent up from range, which gives him a good amount of time to close the distance. His damage would be lower, but advanced combos would allow you to bring the best out of him. Sero to me is a perfect character to add. In my opinion, he makes the most sense to add out of anyone else on this list, but I don't think he'll be added to this game, so his only hope is in a possible My Hero Wants Justice 3 in the distant future. I feel like the developers have purposefully designed other characters in a way that almost deconfirms Sero. The only reason they would add him is if the fan request was high enough. Look at Mortal Kombat X. Kitana had some special moves that were from another character, Jade, and Jade wasn't playable in Mortal Kombat X. Then look at Mortal Kombat 11. Jade is playable in that game, and Kitana has some special moves that would be exclusive to another character, Makayla. And Makayla isn't playable in Mortal Kombat 11, but she is playable in Mortal Kombat X. The point is, certain attacks and abilities that would be perfect for Sero are shared with other characters, so it would feel like he's taken some moves away from those characters. A must-have ability for Sero would be a web swing-esque ability that allows him to quickly fly around the arena by grappling the walls and ceilings. But this exact ability is basically twice as Tilt Quirk 1, and any kind of long-range bind type abilities are similar to what Shota Aizawa can do with his Quirk Special 2 and Tilt Quirk 2. It's definitely not impossible, but you can begin to see how his design would have to change from what you might expect, since other characters can already do what he might be able to do. At number 3 we have the Wild Wild Pussycats. This is a group of 4 pro heroes within an obvious cat-based theme. You'll be most familiar with these characters from the summer training camp arc, as that's when they were introduced and they were prevalent throughout. I would like to see this character design in such a way that incorporates all 4 characters into one, utilising each of their unique quirks for different abilities. For me, I would like to see Tiger as the main playable character, and the other 3 would be present in special attacks. This is mainly because I think that Tiger is the most combat ready of the 4, with a much more hands-on fighting style. The Wild Wild Pussycats are a hero group who don't specialise in combat. They are focused on rescue scenarios, particularly in mountainous regions. However, some of their quirks can be used in combat, although they are very difficult to adapt into a fighting game. Let's run through each of the 4 members of the team and what their abilities are. Firstly, we have Tiger, the main character I would see playable. Tiger's quirk is called Plier Body, and allows him to stretch and flatten his body in any way he likes, which gives him inhuman flexibility. In terms of combat, this can be used to dodge attacks and restrain opponents with ease, but I don't see why it wouldn't be used to attack from long range as well. Mandalay's quirk is called Telepath, and this allows her to speak to people telepathically. She can only send messages to others, she cannot receive messages or read minds. I was thinking this could work as a stun mechanic in this game, where you could telepathically send a message to the enemy and it would stun the opponent if they were hit. This could be a slow moving projectile similar to Jiro's Quirk Special 1 and would leave the opponent in a stunned state out of confusion because they'd be wondering why they could hear a voice in their head. Pixie Bob can be thought of as the leader of the group, and her quirk is called Earth Flow. This is an ability that is much easier to adapt into a fighting game. Earth Flow allows Pixie Bob to freely manipulate the earth when she makes contact with her hands. This could be implemented in a number of unique ways. It could simply be some form of projectile, sending a wave of earth at the opponent similar to Gaara's Sand Tsunami in Jump Force. It could also be something used for close range oriented attacks as well. There's a lot you can do with a versatile quirk like this. Finally, we have Ragdoll. I saved her for last because I don't see how you can adapt her ability into this game. Ragdoll's quirk is called Search and allows her to keep track of up to 100 people no matter where they are, also being able to know their current state as well as their weak points. The weak point element could be implemented somehow. Maybe Ragdoll's special would be a command grab, and when it connects, the opponent would take more damage for a period of time. This is because Ragdoll would expose the weak points of the enemy using her quirk. There's a lot of unique ways you could implement these characters into one, and I don't think it would be fair to only have one of these characters in the game. I think having all 4 of them in one is the way to go. I don't think the Wild Wild Pussycats would ever enter this game because the developers would have to create 4 separate characters with their own sets of animations, and it's just a lot more work for a single character. This could be a very gimmicky character, but I think the important thing is that they will be a lot of fun to play. I know I spoke about the Wild Wild Pussycats for a long time there, but I am going to be speeding it up from here on out. My number 2 character choice is Deidaro Sakaki. This character would have an interesting resource mechanic which is something I always find very interesting in games. I also want to point out that this is probably my favourite member of the Shiha Saikai when we were introduced to everyone in that arc. Deidara's quirk is called Sloshed. This quirk causes anyone near Deidara to lose their balance. The closer they get to him, the more they lose their balance. The strength of this quirk appears to be directly influenced by how much alcohol he has consumed, although I'm not 100% sure if that is the case. Either way, I found this character to be a lot of fun in the show, and his quirk was very simple and interesting. I feel like his gameplay would revolve around a unique resource mechanic similar to Uraruka's rocks and Kaminari's lightning usage. One of his specials would allow him to drink some of his alcohol, and this would make everything else to do with his quirk stronger in some way. Maybe as you drink more, Deidara creates an area of effect around himself that grows in size the more he drinks, causing the opponent to lose control over their character more and more and the closer they get to Deidara. As a trade-off, maybe the more he drinks causes him to become slower, meaning it will be harder for him to use his quirk effectively since he has to be closer to the opponent. Or he could have a Kaminari-like ability, the more he drinks the more powerful he becomes, but if he goes over a certain threshold, yes, he'll be a lot more powerful temporarily, but then he'll be left in a stunned state once that's over. Deidara is an interesting character with an interesting ability, and I think he could be designed in a number of unique ways. I for one really like the idea of having a unique mechanic surrounding how drunk he is, and this would directly affect his abilities and how powerful they are, but something like this should also come with trade-offs, such as decreasing Deidara's mobility, making it harder for him to get close, where his quirk would shine the best. He does wield knives in the show as well, so this could be a little trade-off in those situations where he can't get in, but he'll primarily be a close-range fighter in my opinion. And now for the number one character choice for my DLC character wishlist. This character, along with Han Tesoro to an extent, are basically the reason I wanted to make this video, because I do feel like they have a strong chance in terms of how realistic they are. My first place character is Nato Monoma. Monoma is a student of UA High and a prominent member of Class 1B. Monoma would be a very straightforward character as far as his moveset is concerned, but I just really like him as a character, so I know that I would want him in this game. Monoma's quirk is called Copy. Whenever he makes physical contact with another person, he's able to utilize their quirk as much as he wants for the next 5 minutes. This ability comes with all the strength and benefits of the original quirk. He can also hold onto multiple quirks at a time and switch between using them, but that wouldn't matter for this one-on-one fighting game since you wouldn't be able to hold multiple quirks. My general idea for Monoma in this game is a close-range brawling type character. Monoma doesn't have any special equipment or range abilities, so he's going to be all about the close range. His copy ability could work as a command grab. Upon grabbing the opponent, Monoma would have two options: either press the ability button again, stealing the opponent's quirk and dealing a small amount of damage, or not pressing any button and doing the entire command grab and its full damage. The reason I added this in two options is so that in a Monoma vs Monoma mirror match, the command grab wouldn't be completely useless. You would still be able to get some damage out of it if, since you can't copy his quirk. Once you have your opponent's quirk, there are so many different ways you can design it. For one, you could steal the opponent's entire moveset, which I think is stupid, so I'm just going to disregard that entirely. The way that I would design it is stealing a specific ability from the opponent and being able to use that up to a certain amount of times. You could also attach a time limit to this ability, but I'm not so sure if that will be necessary since the opponent will just zone Monoma out for the duration. Either way, you would gain complete access to a single ability, giving you an additional layer to your moveset. The reason you will be limited in how many times you can use this ability is so that Monoma can't break the game and do some godlike combos that other characters cannot do. Anyway, his moveset would be very basic, being a close range fighter with command grab. He wouldn't be particularly fast in terms of attack speed or movement speed. He'll mostly be an average character when it comes to those stats. There's not much more I can say to hype this character up. I would be ecstatic if this character was added to the game, but it's hard to really make a copy ability sound exciting. You just have to play around with it for yourself and see how you like it. Depending on the game, a copy ability could be extremely exciting or kind of underwhelming. Anyway, I love this guy as a character, and I think his gameplay would be the most appealing for me because I'm a much bigger fan of close range play in this game. Now let's run through some honorable mentions before I end the video. There are a lot more characters I would like to mention here that I'm not going to, and that's simply because of how long it would take me. So let's just get into them. Let's begin with a few members of Class 1B. Firstly, Ibara Shiozaki. I really like this girl's quirk, as you can imagine, but I'm not 100% sure she'd be designed in an interesting way. I like her a lot, but I don't think that she can surpass many other characters for me personally, especially on my main list. Also, she went head to head with Nagama Samura, a character who I personally like more, as well as his abilities. Next, Juzo Honenuki. His quirk allows him to soften anything he touches. This basically turns objects into this pseudo quicksand to entrap opponents or set them off balance. This character mainly missed out because I can't see him having any moves that aren't just long range attacks and zoning. The last member of Class 1B I would like to mention is Kanoko Komori. This character has had basically no screen time in the anime and a quirk hasn't been shown yet. I'm not going to talk about that because some may consider it a spoiler if you only watch the anime, but I quite like her quirk and design, so I would say the reason she missed out is because we see next to nothing of this character. Yuga Aoyama is the only member of Class 1A I am including in my honourable mentions here. With a lot of screen time and a striking design, Aoyama makes a lot of sense in this game. I left him out because his quirk isn't all too versatile. It's fairly straightforward, but he would also take after Kaminari with a mechanic that makes him extremely vulnerable for a period of time after using his abilities. Of course this could be balanced accordingly for gameplay, but I'm not too interested in that mechanic, especially on another character since it already exists on Kaminari, so that's the reason that Aoyama missed out. Next, let's mention a couple of teachers at UA. Firstly, Present Mike. I don't hate zoners and the developers could design characters however they please, but I'm just mentioning that as a precursor for what's to come. I like Present Mike quite a lot overall, but his gameplay wouldn't be much more than shouting sound projectiles full screen, essentially Jiro with less versatility. Like I said, I don't hate zoners or defensive playstyles whatsoever, but I can't say they're the first thing to get me excited in any game. Present Mike mainly missed out for this reason, but also because he wouldn't make too much sense in this game all things considered. He's not only the announcer for, when it says round 1, round 2 and all that sort of stuff, but Jiro also exists who kind of fulfills that niche. Another teacher at UA I'd like to mention is Ectoplasm. Interesting and unique design overall, and I'm a big fan of his quirk which basically creates clones of himself. That's one of the powers that I always find interesting. Anyway, Ectoplasm missed out because he doesn't have that same excitement factor as many of the characters for me personally. When I think of Ectoplasm, I don't think he excites me as much as almost any other character on this list. Also, some of his unique mechanics would already be in this game on other characters, such as Twice's duplication. I'm only going to mention one pro hero here in the honourable mentions, Best Jeanist. Best Jeanist is a character who isn't very prevalent overall, but has been shown in the show basically since the beginning. I mostly like Best Jeanist for his quirk, which allows him to manipulate clothing threads, which he usually uses to restrict his opponents. I can imagine him using some abilities similar to Aizawa by restricting the opponent's movement and closing the distance, whether that's manipulating the fibre of the enemy's clothing or his own clothing. Just going to quickly mention a few characters, just a few villains, and then we are done. None of these characters are major villains, since all major villains are pretty much in the game anyway. Firstly, Moonfish. He's got a cool quirk, a unique design, and I quite like him. His quirk allows him to enlarge and reshape his teeth into sharp blades, which he can use for mobility, offense, or defense. He missed out because there's not much to go off of for him. He's only been in the show for a short amount of time before he was taken out. Magni, another minor villain. Again, another character I like. Her quirk allows her to basically magnetize people around her. I can't imagine her being designed in a fun way, so that's why she missed out. There's just not really too much I can think of in terms of like a character I would really want to play. And finally, Spinner, whose quirk basically makes him a lizard. Spinner is possibly my favourite minor villain to my memory, so that's pretty much why he's here. He can't do anything cool with his quirk, so he missed out because his gameplay would be generic and straightforward, as he just wields a big sword. That's kind of his entire fighting style, which doesn't really appeal to me in a game like this. That's all for my honourable mentions. Like I said, however, I would have mentioned a lot more characters because I think there's so many interesting characters to choose from, but I would be here for a long time if that was the case. I probably would have included a couple of characters from the spin-off My Hero Academia Vigilantes, which is exclusively a manga, but I wanted to stay out of manga territory, especially since a character from that series would have a less than 1% chance of entering My Hero One's Justice. So yeah, that's all for my hypothetical DLC wishlist. To recap, the characters I would love to see the most are Nagama Samura, Hunter Zero, the Wild Wild Pussycats, Deidara Sakaki, and of course Nato Monoma. I think these 5 characters would all have very interesting playstyles, particularly the top 3 picks, and they are all characters whom I enjoy a lot from the show. They're not necessarily my absolute favourite characters from the show, but all of my favourites are already in this game. Like I said, I would have liked to have mentioned many more characters, but I just thought that wouldn't be necessary for the amount of time I would have to spend talking about them. Some that come to mind are Ojiro from Class 1A and Sato, but many more also come to mind. Thank you everyone who's watched this video until the end, it really means a lot to me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.